What's your name? Where you from?
My name is Derek Robinson, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I just turned 64 years old about a week ago. Grew up in Lafayette Projects. Pretty much it was a pretty good experience. Grew up in a single family. My father wasn't in my life, you know what I mean? My mother was a hard-working person. She was an example. That's why I always say a woman is a man's first teacher. You know, when I look at the etymology of the word woman, it's like woman, female. And for some reason, growing up in that environment, it was a close-knit environment. In the 60s, you know, we were like a community. It was families that, like, we all knew each other's family. We had the Green family. Muggsy Bogues, you know, I knew his whole family.
Right.
Skip Wise. There was a lot of people in that community, and at that time, if you were doing something wrong, you had other parents that were either surrogates for other children.
Right.
You know, if I did something wrong, you know, it was always revealed to my mother.
Right.
You know, so I saw a lot of communication there, and growing up, being the oldest child of three, my mother, we were sort of like a latchkey. I was sort of like a latchkey kid. We went to Catholic school in East Baltimore, and I understood the significance of that because my mother wanted us to have a better quality education. And upon going to Catholic school, I met a lot of people like Latrobe, Perkins, and stuff like that. A whole host of people. But you know, I think that growing up and having responsibility, not having a man in my life, my father wasn't in my life, I began to see a lot of dysfunctional things in my life. You know, I was predominantly raised by women. Most of the women in my family were sort of career oriented. My grandmother, she was a school teacher at 139, which is on Central Avenue, and I had an aunt that was a school teacher. You know, so basically that's how it was. I'm gonna let you introduce my brother, my good friend first, and then we can get into it later.
Appreciate it. It's your boy Jay Reed. What's going on? How y'all doing? I'm from PG County originally.
We the real Maryland, though.
Yeah,
Baltimore, real Maryland.
Hey, listen, right? Your
and
city
we started
is my
New
city,
Balance
man.
and Nike boots too.
Hey, your city is my city, man. I love the city. I came here, man. I was locked up out here. You feel me?
Right.
I was on work release out here. I cleaned this whole daggone city, man.
Right.
You feel me?
Right.
And this became my city.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And we welcome you.
Yeah, and I appreciate
and
I ain't
appreciate
get nothing
what you
but,
contribute to the city.
and I ain't get nothing but love from this city. I probably got more love from this city and more niggas that put me on in this city than my own city. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Not kicking the boot for my city, because my city got love for me and dudes try to help me out. But when I came here, I got a lot of love and I got a lot of pushes to move forward.
Right.
You know, so I started off male empowerment program. It was called the Henrietta Lat's House. I just came home 3 years ago, for real.
Right.
You feel me? I was in the Henrietta Lat's program. It was a house on Park Avenue, and pretty much it was like 6-7 guys in there, man. We had space, library, meeting room. It was nice.
How did that work out with 7 guys being there?
You know, everybody, for real, it was selected though.
Right.
So you had to be a serious dude to be up in there, you feel me, as far as like your integrity, your trustworthy, you know, because ain't no locked doors or nothing like that. So you had to be recommended from inside. You had to have some credibility inside, or somebody had to vouch for you to be able to say, look, this is a good man.
Recommendation.
You know, you had to get some recommendation to get up in there, man. And a good dude named Thomas, man, lives across my cell.
Right.
We was up BCCC, and we was on, I think we was on work release at the time. And I was just trying to figure out, like, yo, am I going to go back home? You know, and try to fight who I used to be and who everybody thinking I'm going to be, or am I going to, you know, set up shop out here?
Right. So who did you used to be?
Back in the day, man, I used to be a little wild, young knucklehead, like Brother Derek. You know, no father figure.
Right.
You know, I had my grandfather. You know, and guys within the church that I grew up in. That was it. You know, I grew up in a single mother home. I was the only child. That was the blessing of it. I was the only child, so my mother But it was a lot of my mother. My mother was 18 when she had me.
Right.
You know, 1 year old, I moved to North Carolina. You know, and no, my mother moved to North Carolina, and you know, got finessed for real, to be honest with you. Got finessed, you know, by an older dude that was married.
Right.
And that's how I came out. So for real, I never met my father to this very day. You know, I never got to meet my real father, never seen a picture of him or anything, because basically I was hitting to save his marriage. You know, I got brothers and sisters I don't know, you feel me, you know. So long story short, when she had me, she moved back down here.
Right.
So she came from Concord, North Carolina, moved back down here. You feel me?
Yeah.
So
And
being as though you said that, right? So I want to piggyback on what he said. So we have an older generation and a younger generation. And when you say back then, when you did something, everybody told your mother.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that may have, if that was still existed, do you think that would have helped you? And your upbringing, if people was to run and tell your mother every time you did something?
Yeah, most definitely. In my era, motherfuckers looked in the opposite way, you know.
Right.
In his
Bring
era,
that mind your business.
in his era,
right
you know, I probably had one person in my community. I grew up around Pine Brook Apartments, you feel me? And it was Miss Turner, rest in peace, Miss Turner.
Yeah.
You know, she was the only one in my ass.
Right.
Other than that, motherfuckers let me do whatever the fuck I wanted to, you feel me?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Up at the rec or whatever the case may be, you know, when you shooting basketball or whatever, they ain't really giving a fuck. They trying to deal with their own kids for real in my era, you know.
So what you think about this generation now?
Well, you know, a lot of times I feel like growing up in Baltimore City, you know, I grew up like in the 70s. We moved. My mother, you know, she acquired an education and got a degree, and we left the city and we went to like Northeast Baltimore. Back then, out near the Alameda, Morgan, and at that time when I moved out there, it was more or less white folks still living there. And I think through affirmative action, with a lot of older people, we kind of like forgot the city. It was like a vacuum. It was like a relief to move from the hood into a better community. But what I found out was that what we didn't do, we didn't go back and inspire younger people.
Right.
Now I came up.
So this is what your generation, y'all didn't go back.
Yeah, we did. You know, it's like I got mine, they got theirs to get.
Right.
You know, it's like the Jeffersons. You know, it was also a lot of things that I saw as a young man, like certain television shows. You know, like the Jeffersons, and we're moving on up. But if you moving on up and you ain't moving nobody else up with you, then you have a gap.
Right.
You know, so when at 13 I moved out to Northeast Baltimore, but I still had ties to White Lock and Brookfield, Loretta Avenue, Poplar Grove. I still had friends because me and my brother were well liked in a lot of communities, and we would go back. And what I saw as a young child, I saw the comparison.
Right.
You know, I saw where I would come out my house so I could hear bees and birds. But then when I went back to East Baltimore, down in Chapel and Wolf Street and neighborhoods like that, you know, it was like when I caught the 36 to go back out to Woodburn Avenue, you could see the transition.
Right.
You could see the difference. Even though at that time, a lot of blacks.
As far as the conditions of
the environment. Your environment.
Yeah.
And I always say that because your environment is conducive to your behavior.
And a lot of other things.
You know, so, but, you know, when I found out, I chose going back more than I chose that transition of living out there. Because when I was 13, 14 years old, I remember the first time I got introduced to a drug strip. I had a guy live up the street from me. Used to be a family in Baltimore, the Simons, and they used to Arab a lot. And this guy up the street from me, he was a slick dude. You know, he was a little advanced than I was because he was from Wolf Street. And he would take me back down to Chapel Street, Chapel Hill, and I would sit there, and he always had a knot of money. And I remember sitting, he said, look, Derek, I'm going to buy you a tub and some tasers. You just sit over there. It was the first time I got introduced to the heroin market. Right. And I would sit there. And out of all the guys in that community we lived in, he would always choose me because me and him were real tight. His name was Greg. Greg had a couple goals in his mouth. He wore the slick Dan rubber shoes, the wedge heels, you know, and he was just a slick dude. And what fascinated with me was that when we got back on the block, down the street, one of the streets down there, you know, he was like a king. I was sitting there, everybody calling Greg. They pull up in the car, Greg, Greg, Greg. And that was the first time I had got introduced to the drug game. You know, I seen how he displayed that type of valor, you know, to his customers. You know, he was very modest. You know, people would come up to him, they didn't have money for drugs, he would look out for them. The little kids would come there, and to me, you know, the way my mother was cultivating me to be, you know, to go to Poly and, you know, be an engineer, I was more attracted to that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I started seeing things, you know, but I didn't really get into the drug game at that point, but that was my first introduction to the wholesaling of drugs and stuff, things like that. But even through later years, I got involved, and it was more like a unit. We all functioned. You know, you knew this guy in West Baltimore, you knew Cherry Hill, you knew different people. But as time went on, the younger generation started getting into it, and I started seeing the division. You know what I mean? And I felt like it was our responsibility. If, like, I'm a journeyman plumber, I give him an example. He's my apprentice. So whatever I learned, I have to pass it on to him. But we didn't do that. We created a vacuum. You know what I mean? And we started exploiting young boys. You know, we was the ones that would give them the dope and let them sell. They work all week, but we would never give them any type of core values. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. You know what I mean? Every time I turned around, one of them was doing, you know, get locked up for doing something stupid or senseless, and we would bail them out, but we wouldn't sit them down and say, look, man, that behavior that you're displaying, you know, it's going to cost you either your life, or it's going to cost you a career in the penal system.
I had a situation like that, right? So, in the project, we used to have a guy. He used to, and on our way to school, he used to say, "Fuck school, G a week," right?
Damn.
Like real talk, he used to say, "Fuck school."
That shit sound good.
No, it did. So for quite some time, you know, we ignored it, but then one day it was like, "You serious?" And he pulled that joint out right then and there, paid us, gave us the pack.